A 16-year-old boy could not feel his own hands. He held the reins anyway. Ahead of him, across the sand near a small hill called Montgisard, waited the army of the most feared commander in the Muslim world. Saladin had never lost a war like this one. The boy leading the opposing force had a disease that was slowly destroying his body, nerve by nerve, year by year. Doctors of his time had no cure for it. Most people who had it were sent away from their families forever. This boy was a king, and in a few hours, he would do something almost no one alive expected. His name was Baldwin IV, and he ruled the Kingdom of Jerusalem, a small Christian state built on land that Muslim rulers wanted back. Baldwin had leprosy, a disease that damages the skin and nerves. Surviving medical records and chronicler accounts from his own court confirm the diagnosis was made when he was still a child, noticed first by his tutor, William of Tyre, who saw that young Baldwin felt no pain when other boys scratched his arm during play. That silence in his skin was the first warning sign of something no one wanted to name. Baldwin became king at 13. He inherited a kingdom surrounded by enemies, ruled by nobles who doubted he would live long enough to matter, and threatened by a general who was uniting the Muslim territories around him into one powerful force. Saladin was not just a soldier. He was a strategist, a unifier, and a man who had already taken Egypt and much of Syria. Historians agree he intended to take Jerusalem too, and most people assumed it was only a matter of time. What made Baldwin's position almost unbearable was not only the war outside his walls. It was the war happening inside his own body. Leprosy in the 12th century meant slow paralysis. It meant losing feeling in fingers, then hands, then feet. It meant the face could change shape as the disease progressed. Chroniclers who saw Baldwin as a teenager described a king who still rode, still trained, still commanded, even as parts of his body stopped responding to his will. He was fighting two enemies at once, and neither one showed mercy. In the summer of 1177, Saladin gathered a large army, likely numbering in the tens of thousands, and moved toward Jerusalem's undefended heartland, expecting little real resistance. Many of the kingdom's experienced knights were away or occupied elsewhere. Baldwin had a small force, some accounts suggest fewer than 500 knights, along with several thousand infantry, nowhere near enough to face Saladin's numbers in an open, fair fight. By ordinary military logic, this battle should never have happened. It should have been a Muslim victory recorded briefly in the histories and forgotten. That is the mystery worth sitting with. Not whether Baldwin was brave. That much is documented. The real question is how a teenage king, already losing control of his own limbs, made a decision so bold that it reshaped the balance of power in the region, at least for a few more years. If you enjoy uncovering the real stories hidden behind famous battles, moments like this one are exactly why history keeps pulling people back in. Saladin, confident after early raids near Ashkelon, allowed his army to spread out, looting and moving with less discipline than usual. This is where sources agree the turning point began to form. Baldwin, informed of the disorganized state of Saladin's forces, made a decision that surprised his own commanders. Instead of waiting behind Jerusalem's walls for safety, he chose to march out and strike while the enemy was vulnerable. Picture the scene chroniclers describe. Dust rising from thousands of hooves. The metallic smell of armor heated by the Levantine sun. Soldiers shouting orders in Latin, French, and Arabic across the field. And somewhere near the center of the Christian line, a young king whose hands could barely grip a sword anymore, wearing gloves to hide fingers already changed by disease, staying mounted through sheer will. Baldwin carried into battle a relic believed at the time to be a piece of the true cross, an object of enormous spiritual significance for his soldiers. Whether or not modern people share that belief, its presence mattered deeply to the men fighting that day. It gave them a reason larger than survival. It gave them the sense that they were not simply outnumbered soldiers, but something closer to defenders of a sacred cause. The Christian force struck the scattered wing of Saladin's army near Montgisard on November 25, 1177. What followed was chaos for Saladin's side. Their formation, weakened by overconfidence and separation, could not organize fast enough to respond. Contemporary accounts, including those referenced by later historians analyzing Arabic and Latin sources together, describe a rout, not a narrow win. Saladin's forces suffered heavy losses. Saladin himself reportedly escaped the battlefield with a small group of guards, riding hard toward Egypt, leaving behind a shattered army. For a king many expected to be a symbol only, a boy kept alive mostly for ceremony while real power sat with his advisors, this was staggering. Baldwin had planned and led a battle that damaged the reputation of the most powerful military figure in the region. It was not just a victory. It was proof that his mind and his will were still fully in command, even as his body was not. Winning the battle did not cure him. That is the part of this story that never gets easier to sit with. Leprosy continued its slow progression. Within a few years, Baldwin was reportedly losing his eyesight. Historical accounts describe a king eventually unable to walk unaided, carried into later battles on a litter, still giving orders, still present at the front, because retreating from responsibility was never something he accepted, even when his body offered every reason to. Here is where the story becomes more than a single battle. Baldwin's condition made questions of succession urgent almost from the beginning of his reign. He could not have children. His nobles, and eventually European powers watching from a distance, worried constantly about who would rule after him and whether the kingdom could survive the transition. This pressure shaped nearly every political decision made around him, including tense negotiations over his sister's marriage, since her husband would likely inherit the throne. Court politics grew increasingly bitter, with rival nobles maneuvering for influence as Baldwin's health declined. It would be simple to frame this only as tragedy, a heroic young king slowly failing while enemies gathered again. But that framing misses something the sources make clear. Baldwin did not disappear from leadership after Montgisard. He continued negotiating truces with Saladin when it served the kingdom's survival, understanding that continuous warfare was not sustainable for a small, vulnerable state. He balanced military pressure with diplomacy, a skill remarkable for a ruler of any age, let alone one still a teenager during much of this period. By the time Baldwin reached his early 20s, contemporary witnesses describe someone barely able to move independently, his face altered by the disease's progression, guiding meetings and battle plans through advisors who read documents to him and helped him communicate his decisions. Even stripped of physical ability, historical records suggest he remained mentally sharp and politically engaged almost until the end. Baldwin IV died in 1185, likely in his early 20s, after years of physical decline that most people in his position would not have survived nearly as long. His death created exactly the succession crisis his court had feared for years. Within roughly 2 years, internal disputes over the throne weakened the kingdom's unity. Saladin, who had rebuilt his forces and his reputation since Montgisard, returned with a much larger and better organized campaign. In 1187, Jerusalem fell to him following the catastrophic defeat at the Battle of Hattin, a battle fought under leadership very different from Baldwin's. This is where the meaning of Montgisard changes, and it is worth pausing on that shift, because it reframes everything that came before. Baldwin's victory did not save Jerusalem permanently. It delayed the inevitable. But delay is not nothing. It bought the kingdom nearly a decade of continued existence, negotiation, and relative stability under a leader who, despite failing health, refused to let his kingdom collapse while he was still able to guide it. The tragedy is not that Baldwin failed. The tragedy is that the system built around him could not hold once he was gone. For anyone drawn to stories where personal struggle and historical consequence are impossible to separate, Baldwin's reign offers one of the clearest examples from this era, and it rewards a closer look far beyond this single battle. What lingers about Baldwin IV is not only the unlikely military victory of a teenager against Saladin. It is the image historians keep returning to, a young ruler who, facing a disease with no cure and a body that betrayed him more each year, chose to keep leading anyway. He did not get the chance to grow old. He did not get to see whether his kingdom could survive long term. What he did get was a handful of years where his judgment, not his illness, defined how people remembered him. The exact nature of his final months remains only partially documented, and some details historians debate, particularly around the full extent of his blindness and how much direct command he held near the very end. What is not in doubt is the battle that made people take him seriously in the first place, and the discipline it took to keep ruling long after most would have stopped trying. Baldwin IV never asked to be remembered as a symbol of resilience. He was simply a king trying to protect what mattered to him, using whatever strength his body still allowed. That may be exactly why his story still holds attention centuries later. Not because he defeated Saladin once on a dusty field near Montgisard, but because he kept showing up afterward, again and again, until his body finally would not let him anymore. If stories like this stay with you, there are countless more moments in history where ordinary limits met extraordinary will, each one worth discovering in its own time.